She sweetly asks in English for him to come back later, only for him to ask in Korean if she's the owner. Reverting to Korean, Iso asks what he wants, and the man replies he saw the post for a server. His name is Kim Tony, and he excitedly interviews for the job, saying that his father is Korean, and he's been there for a year. The rest of the team debate whether Iso will approve, and Se-Roi is stunned when Iso easily hires him on the spot. She says that since it's Itaewon, it'll be good to have another English speaker in the pub. Iso adds that it'll be nice having a foreigner around, and Tony interjects that he is Korean. Se-Roi asks if he can start tomorrow, and to his confusion, Tony answers, yes, cool. Tony repeats that he can start tomorrow, and Se-Roi parrots cool back. Gunsu helps Iso move into her new apartment. He asks why she moved and nearly chokes when Iso coolly says she got kicked out. Before she can answer, Iso receives a call from a PD she'd approached about getting Dambam on TV. When she hangs up, Gunsu asks if she secured a spot, but she waves him off to call Se-Roi. As she brags about getting Dambam introduced to a program, Gunsu flips through the folders and sees the apology letter she'd had to write when they were caught at Dambam as minors, complete with a sketch of Se-Roi. His heart breaks as he looks at her. Meanwhile, Suwa walks up behind Se-Roi just as he's ending the call with Iso. She guesses something good happened, and Se-Roi admits Dambam has a chance to appear on a show called The Best Pub. She congratulates him, but her face falls when he praises Iso. Se-Roi asks if she got home well the other night, and Suwa apologizes for causing a scene. She says she feels better after Se-Roi had told her she was just living her best life, and Suwa says she'll continue to do so. As a Jang Jie employee. Across the street, Gunwon sees the pair and scowls at what appears to be an affectionate exchange. He meets President Jang for lunch and pointedly asks what his father plans to do about Se-Roi. He admits Se-Roi has done well and may even build a Dambam brand someday. However, 10 years is a long time to work and only have a small pub to show for it. President Jang says that if Gunwon can convince Suwa to marry into their family, he won't force an arranged marriage. Gunwon is excited. Se-Roi is merely a test to see whether Suwa is one of his people. Se-Roi arrives at the PD office for The Best Pub and freezes at the sight of Gunwon sitting across the table. Gunwon balks that the other bar being featured in his episode is Dambam, and the PD awkwardly jokes that it's not like they're arch-enemies. We are enemies, Se-Roi confirms, taking his seat across from Gunwon. After the meeting, he comments that Se-Roi looked good with Suwa the other day, declaring that both he and his father are fond of Suwa. I guess she talked to you out of pity a few times, Gunwon says, pointing out that dating a middle school graduate ex-con doesn't even compete with marrying the son of Jang Jie Group. Se-Roi retorts that Suwa certainly wouldn't go for a murderer. He wonders if Gunwon is threatened by a middle school graduate ex-con, and Gunwon spits back President Jang's assessment of Se-Roi. He said you'd never be a threat to us, Gunwon seethes, continuing that Se-Roi is just an assessor to judge Suwa's loyalty. Gunwon calls Suwa to brag about ousting Se-Roi from The Best Pub. She's shocked, and he screams at he not to like Se-Roi. Gunwon starts to warn her that if his father finds out about her relationship with Se-Roi, but she hangs up on him. Meanwhile, Iso gets the call from the PD that Dambam has been cut from the program, with no explanation. She announces that the show has been cancelled to the staff, just as Se-Roi returns to the pub. Drinking on the roof, Se-Roi thinks about what Gunwon said and all the things Suwa has said, from confessing to turning Dambam over to the police to saying he shouldn't like her anymore. Iso finds him up there, and Se-Roi apologizes for the TV program falling through. She waves it off. Se-Roi suggests they take a walk. As they wander, Iso asks what happened at the station, but he assures her it was nothing. Suwa calls out to Se-Roi. She eyes Iso suspiciously and asks if they're on a date. Iso looks expectantly at Se-Roi and rolls her eyes when he denies it. He guesses Suwa is getting off work, and she starts to say something about the TV program. It's okay, he smiles. I can do it some other time. It's not like there's only one TV show. The implication is clear. He thinks Suwa is responsible, and she's visibly stung as he breezes past her with Iso. She watches them walk away, and then turns to go her own way. Iso assumes something big happened for him to react this way, and Se-Roi agrees he's being pathetic. He tells Iso he feels like he's against a wall, and she asks if he likes Suwa that much. Despite knowing Suwa got the pub suspended, she observes that Se-Roi remains unchanged. Se-Roi chuckles that she's talking about betrayal again, but Iso tells him, my mother said studying hard doesn't guarantee success these days. Because of that, mom let Iso learn music, sports, and everything in between. Se-Roi comments that she's always been quite daring, and Iso sighs that she feels like she's playing with a handicap these days. He doesn't understand. So Iso confesses that Suwa was not the one that reported Dambam and got them suspended. She explains someone who held a grudge against Iso called the police, and Se-Roi's eyes widen. He tells Iso to go ahead, and he'll catch up before running after Suwa. Iso narrates, no matter who my opponent was, I eventually won. So, I'm not giving up. Se-Roi races to catch Suwa at the bus stop. She's stunned to see him arrive out of breath, but Se-Roi demands to know why she lied about reporting Dambam. He asks if she wanted him to hate her, and she replies that President Jiang is watching him but falls silent when Se-Roi grabs her hand. He apologizes for being selfish and making her struggle between Jiang Jie and himself. He asks her to wait just a little longer. The bus arrives and Suwa breaks away, but Se-Roi calls after her that he doesn't care what she does. I'll destroy Jiang Jie company, he vows. I'll make you quit to ease your mind. The bus pulls away and Suwa collapses into his seat, muttering that Se-Roi is a fool. Se-Roi pulls out his phone and dials Li Ho-jin. A young man perched in front of a wall of monitors answers, and Se-Roi asks about the money he'd invested in stocks. Ho-jin says in total with the money Se-Roi had invested with Jiang Jie 8 years ago, it amounts to 1.9 billion won. Se-Roi orders Ho-jin to invest everything in Jiang Jie. When President Jiang arrives at Jiang Jie HQ the following morning, his secretary runs up with the stockholders list and the bad news that Se-Roi now has 1.9 billion won invested in the company. President Jiang thinks back to Gunwon's scandal 8 years ago, which caused a dip in Jiang Jie's stocks, and cackles wickedly that it's time to eat. Sungkwan greets a group at the door, apologizing they're not open. Gunsu greets President Jiang and Sungkwan innocently greets Gunsu's father. President Jiang turns to see Se-Roi, standing with Iso. President Jiang realizes that Se-Roi surely received a significant amount of money from Dad's death, and then invested it in Jiang Jie upon being released from prison. It had to be meaningful. President Jiang muses that he'd thought he was done trampling on Se-Roi after expelling him from school and putting him in jail, but looking at him now, he realizes that Sua's words that Se-Roi always accomplishes his goals were true. So, your goal is my doom, President Jiang thinks. It's funny I'm feeling this way at my age. In response, Se-Roi welcomes them to Dambam with a bow. President Jiang admits he'd wanted to see Se-Roi, and Se-Roi returns the sentiment.